List 56, Part 2. We left off in middle of paragraph 6. So let me continue reading. A skillful individual in his closet, with all the local codes before him, might compile a law on some subjects of taxation for the whole Union without any aid from oral information. And it may be expected that whenever internal taxes may be necessary, and particularly in cases requiring uniformity throughout the states, the more simple objects will be preferred. So I read this part in the previous part. I read this part of the paragraph in the previous part. Now I'll continue with the rest. To be fully sensible of the facility which will be given to this branch of federal legislation by the assistance of the state codes, we need only suppose for a moment that this or any other state were divided into a number of parts, each having and exercising within itself a power of local legislation. Is it not evident that a degree of local information and preparatory labor would be found in the several volumes of their proceedings, which would very much shorten the labor of the general legislature and render a much smaller number of members sufficient for it? So remember, and our anti-federalists are criticizing that 65 members are not going to be enough to represent the 13 states in the first Congress. And Madison is refuting their argument. He's saying no, because these 65 people are going to be elected from large districts within your states. And as we talked in Federalist number 10, the hope is that these people will be wiser than a lot of the people amongst the population, and with their wisdom and also with their knowledge and then access to the codes of different states, access to the laws of different states, they can kind of get a good idea. And when they write a law that has to do with interstate commerce, the law will be wise and will have looked at everything that they need to look at. He continues, the federal councils will derive great advantage from another circumstance. The representatives of each state will not only bring with them a considerable knowledge of its laws and a local knowledge of their respective districts, but will probably, in all cases, have been members and may even at the very time be members of the state legislature, where all the local information and interests of the state are assembled, and from whence they may easily be conveyed by a very few hands into the legislature of the United States. So it's saying, look, there's a good chance that some of these people that are going to be elected to the House of Representatives have already been your representatives in the state legislature. So they're already knowledgeable with everything you need to know, or everything they need to know about your state. So when they come to the federal legislature, to the House of Representatives, they're already knowledgeable enough of everything that is important to you, people of the state. And they can gradually learn from other representatives from other states, look at their laws, and also in person become familiar with what the interests of different representatives are. And then when they sit to write the law, they will be much more knowledgeable than you give them credit for right now. I'll continue. With regard to the regulation of the militia, there are scarcely any circumstance in reference to which local knowledge can be said to be necessary. The general face of the country, whether mountainous or level, most fit for the operations of infantry and cavalry, is almost the only consideration of this nature that can occur. The art of war teaches general principles of organization, movement, and discipline, which apply universally. And he says the third thing that these representatives in the House of Representatives will be doing is regulating the militia. Remember, the first two things were taxation, commerce. And here it says, as far as militia goes, we know that by just looking at military history and knowledge that we have of war, you can train people for mountainous region to fight in mountainous regions and level places, flat places, and sooner or later, there's not much to it. After some training and getting some able people to be trainers, then you can pretty much do the what you need to do, what the House of Representatives needs to know about militia work will be easy for them. Then the next paragraph, the attentive reader will discern that the reasoning here used to prove the sufficiency of a moderate number of representatives does not in any respect contradict what was urged on another occasion with regard to the extensive information which the representatives ought to possess and the time that might be necessary for acquiring it. This information, so far as it may relate to local objects, is rendered necessary and difficult not by a difference of laws and local circumstances within a single state, but of those among different states. Taking each state by itself, its laws are the same, and its interests but little diversified. A few men, therefore, will possess all the knowledge requisite for a proper representation of them. Were the interests and affairs of each individual state perfectly simple and uniform, a knowledge of them in one part would involve a knowledge of them in every part, and the whole state might be competently represented by a single member taken from any part of it. On a comparison of the different states together, we find a great dissimilarity in their laws and in many other circumstances connected with the objects of federal legislation, with all of which the federal representatives ought to have some acquaintance. Okay, here's one of those times that Madison tells you that there are so many differences amongst these states. Now, he doesn't emphasize it, but there was. For those of you who look at America now or have recently immigrated here, you think that a lot of things are uniform in America. We take it for granted that 2 centuries ago, all these 13 states were so different from one another. Different laws because of their colonial past, because of their population, especially in the South, because of the number of enslaved people. They had to do these really weird laws. And as a result of that, society, culture, everything would be different just by having so many enslaved people amongst you. So Madison is mentioning it here. He doesn't emphasize it because he doesn't want to, because right now he's in the business of uniting America. But the reality is that for 7, 8 decades, majority of Americans, all the way up to the Civil War, they thought of them for the most part as citizens of their state rather than citizens of America. So let me continue reading here. The changes of time, as was formerly remarked, on the comparative situation of the different states will have an assimilating effect. In time, these states will become more like one another. At present, some of the states are little more than a society of husbandmen. Few of them have made much progress in those branches of industry which give a variety and complexity to the affairs of a nation. These, however, will in all of them be the fruits of more advanced population and will require on the part of each state a fuller representation. The foresight of the convention has accordingly taken care that the progress of population may be accompanied with a proper increase of the representative branch of the government. So we will, he says that right now a lot of states don't have that much industry. They are mostly farmers and small landowners. But as we go forward, as the population increases, as industries take off, then with the increase in the number of populations, you're going to get more representatives, and it's going to represent all different variety of interests and groups in your amongst your people. But each one of them will be hopefully wise enough to be familiar with the laws of your state, and then when he or she goes to the House of Representatives, can not only represent what your interests are, but also share his or her knowledge of the state that he or she comes from with the other representatives. And this way they can all put their brains together and come up with a good law that will regulate the interstate commerce and other laws that will affect all the states. So that's the emphasis. He doesn't mention anything about Federalist 10, but indirectly he's saying that we are hoping that refined individuals, refined characters will eventually be elected to the House of Representatives and will represent their states well as have the good of the country above anything else.